Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Faisal and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, as you all know, that simple plastic bag can take up to at least 500 years to decompose, while a plastic bottle can take almost 300 years. But despite of that, plastic is continuously in daily use. Might be because of it's cheaper, more affordable and accessible. Might be because of there is no law existing, or if the laws are existing, there is no implementation. Or one of the most important thing is, where are the alternatives? These are the very important questions to address. Around 400 million tons of plastic produced worldwide. In 1950, it was estimated 1.7 million ton. And by 2050, it's estimated that it would be almost more than 1,000 million ton. But unfortunately, the recycling rate across the world is only 10%. 44 million tons of plastic leaked into the environment, and at least or more than 8 million tons of plastic ends up in oceans. That's why we are losing at least 100,000 species, including the fish, in our oceans. By 2050, it is estimated that there would be more plastic in ocean rather than fish. It's horrible. There are lots of threats from the plastic pollution, particularly to the human health, agriculture, livestock, obviously to marine and the wildlife, and resultantly to the food security and economy. The recent global plastic treaty talks in Busan, South Korea, ended up without any consensus, suspended till 2025. And it was all because of the oil-producing nations and fossil fuel lobbies. This lack of agreement has significant implications on environment, human health, economy, and resultantly, it triggers more effects in the form of climatic changes. We will examine all this in our program, but also the World Bank's recent report, The Waves of Plastic, a snapshot of marine plastic pollution in South Asia, that reveals some alarming statistics across South Asia, including Pakistan. To discuss this very important topic, we have in our studios Ms. Zainab Naeem. She is the expert in circular economy and a research fellow at STPI, Sustainable Development and Policy Institute. Most welcome to you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your presence. And with her, Dr. Fasiha Safdar. She is the marine climate expert and she is serving at National Institute of Maritime Affairs. Most welcome to you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And online joining us, Ms. Afia Salam. She is well-known senior environmental journalist from Karachi, and she is also my mentor as well. So most welcome to you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your presence online. My first question to you, Zainab. We all have witnessed the Conference of Party, the 29th Conference of Party in Azerbaijan. You were the part of it. Obviously, Dr. Fasiha was also. It's somewhat similar that what we are witnessing from the last 29 COPs and what we have witnessed in South Korea regarding the global plastic treaty talks. Primarily failed because of the oil-producing nation interests and the fossil fuel lobbies. Then it's complete disagreement on the treaty objectives, whether we have to reduce the plastic production or increasing the recycling and the waste capacity. Now, there is a lack of consensus. Even some argue that there must have to be voting. And some argue that it is already watered down because of the lots of text removed from the treaty. So what would be the ultimate future of the global plastic treaty and those negotiations suspended until 2025?
So, Faisal, I would not say that what happened at COP29, we observed the similar fate at the INC5. I think it was worse than that. Why? Because at the United Nations Environment, they gave the deadline of 2024 that we must finalize the text, and whether we are going to come up with a legally binding document that will address this crisis. Otherwise, it will become an emergency situation, and it is
No
becoming
doubt.
that.
Yes.
So what happened there, that there were two groups basically. First is the High Ambition Coalition that comprised of around 60 to 67 countries, mostly African countries and Norway and other countries. And then there was another group, as you mentioned, of the like-minded group, which included Saudi Arabia, Russian Federation, Iran, etc. So initially when the talks were started, so they were of the view that the High Ambition Coalition wanted the treaty to ban the plastic production, especially the harmful plastics or the single-use plastics that's actually creating the problem. But the like-minded group wanted something around mostly waste management policies or waste reduction policies, nothing more than that. So that's how it started, and during the INC 5 also there were many challenges because ministers were not involved, the technocrats were not involved, and so the technical discussion couldn't take place, and there was mostly the countries were coming up with their own stance rather than coming up with collective stance on what needs to be done. So I think that's where there was deadlock, and on the final plenary day, what happened that the Ecuador representative, he came up with the text, the chair's text, that's what they call it, and reducing it from 77 pages to 22 pages, and then he said that from this text we might start the discussion again, the negotiations in 2025. And so this has been happening, and this was the fourth time that due to the deadlock the negotiations couldn't come up with any fruitful outcome. So this is what happened, and this is something we see that around plastics, it's not just the crisis that we are facing, but also the vested interests.
Yes.
And then the technical debate gets missing. So I think this is what happened there. Again, this is not a good situation because plastics is a problem similar to climate action, climate crisis that we are facing, and without collective action nothing will happen. But when there is no text around plastics, legally binding document is missing, I don't think so we will come up with a fruitful outcome to reducing plastic pollution in the world.
Your point well taken. Dr. Fasiha, as Zainab said, to what extent it's correct that when most experts really believe that global plastic treaties, real text already watered down, as she is depicting that out of 77 pages, it was reduced to 22. Yeah. So during negotiation process, and if even the treaty agreed upon next year, which seems difficult to have on absolute consensus, as there is clear divide between over 100 countries and versus the few. Yeah. So it would be toothless and could be ineffective as compared to the volume of the crisis of the plastic pandemic. So how do you see, because legally binding treaty which binds every nation across the world to not only reduce the plastic production but also its dissemination, its consumption, or its leak into the environment?
Yeah. Thank you for your question. As Zainab has already given a very good brief about the background about the treaty, it started in 2022, and 175 countries under the United Nations Environmental Program, they agreed to get together and start working on one of the aspects of the triple planetary crisis. One is the climate change, which is already the focus of a lot of global attention. Then there is biodiversity loss, and then there is pollution, and the biggest polluter nowadays in the modern world, that is plastic. So despite all the agreements, despite all the actions and the intentions, good intentions that the governments of the world are showing, we are still witnessing a 9 to 10% increase in plastic production every year. So the production is still increasing. So until and unless the production slows down, the actions we are witnessing, we are not seeing the result of the good intentions of the countries. So what I've heard and read about this global plastic treaty, the basic point of contention was the production of plastics, because production of plastic happens with the involvement of fossil fuels. So the strong coalition which has the oil producing countries, they had some reservations about the part where the production of plastics is curtailed was being discussed. So that caused a deadlock. So as Zainab mentioned very correctly, there are some vested vested interest. There is a competition between the economic interest and the interest of the wider world, the sustainability and the survival of the planet. So the basic idea behind this treaty is that you move on to sustainable consumption and management of plastic. So that is the basic idea behind the treaty. And of course, when you're moving towards sustainability, there are some interests that have to be traded for that. And some of the economic interests can go down in that treaty.
Definitely.
But there are alternatives.
You are absolutely right, because ultimately, if that is not legally binding and without any vested interests, that is not going to serve humanity, really.
The humanity, right.
Ma'am, Afia, what would be the implications of the absence of any sort of effective global plastic treaty on environment, human health and economy, as fossil fuel lobbies continue to dominate any kind of climate or environmental talks, and don't want any sort of a treaty which is going to harm their businesses particularly, even at the cost of nature and existence of life on earth? Why international system becomes so naive to decide things in favor of humanity and in favor of nature?
So thank you, Faisal, and thank you for your kind words earlier. So I really do not think that they are naive, because naive people are hardly ever able to, protect their interests, the vested interests, as you have rightly called it. So it's a deliberate move, and the fact that we are at COP29 and still away from the promised emissions cuts, which were the reason for starting this entire journey, shows the intent and shows who actually wields a lot of power. So as far as and not just the plastic treaty, all the other treaties, people have been rolling back. I mean, the countries have rolled back.
I think so. We have some distortion into the telephone line, might be, or online.
I
Okay,
hear
okay,
your,
please go on, go on. Please go on, ma'am.
So my point is, the vested interests have been very, very powerful, and that is why we have seen all the other tipping points, just we have been crossing them as far as climate change has been concerned. So I'm not really surprised that plastic treaty also has met the same fate. But having said that, the voices of reason, the voices of caution and warnings are becoming a lot more resonant. And the two young ladies who have already been to the COP, they must have seen how it works, that the pushback from civil society and other environmental organizations is there now, right? So that is the main issue, that climate change being a behavior change issue, the communication has not been effective. And I think that is where a lot more needs to be done at the national level as well as at the international level. Because unless and until we can garner more support, who can apply their energies into pushing back on those vested interests, on the big oil lobbies, etc., there's not going to be enough of decision making where we can see the hope, and then where we can see the implementation of that hope translating into, going into the text and going into resolutions and going into treaties. So I think a lot more work needs to be done on the communications.
Definitely, your point well taken. Zainab, what about the World Bank's recent issued report that gives alarming statistics? It says that including Pakistan, the 6 South Asian countries transporting solid waste pollution, including the plastics, the industrial effluents, domestic water waste and microplastics across border through 20 major rivers into sea, and highest leakage rate is among 6 countries, including Afghanistan and Pakistan. So how do you see that, that report particularly?
So South Asia region is, of course, one of the most populous region in the world, and the population is, it's now being not being controlled like other regions. So I think when there is a population crisis, pollution crisis also go in parallel with that. So yes, South Asian countries are contributing because in almost every other country in the South Asia, it's connected with rivers, with canal system, and also with the sea. So they are contributing, because when population is increasing, the consumption is increasing, and also there's another factor. So 3 of the South Asian countries, including India, Bangladesh and Pakistan, here the plastic production system is well established compared to other countries in the South Asia. So there's production happening, then there's consumption happening, and then due to mismanagement of this plastics waste, the waste leakage is also happening in the water bodies. So yes, as per the report, this is a crisis that we are seeing here in these countries because of the waste mismanagement. In India and Bangladesh, the waste collection system is better compared to Pakistan, but in Pakistan, the consumption is less compared to these 2 countries. But consumption is less, but because of there's no waste segregation system, and that's why around data, the challenge is that's where the challenge lies.
That's the very important area to address, really. Dr. Fasiha, this report, this World Bank report, actually seeks to establish a comprehensive baseline of the plastic waste flow into the water bodies in the region, and support the formulation of evidence-based policies and strategies for the plastic pollution reduction and a transition towards a regional circular economy framework for plastic particularly. Any concrete measure taken by Pakistan in this regard?
So as the name signifies, waves of plastic.
Yes.
The report lays a lot of focus on the water bodies. Most of the, for the unversed, I must mention here that most of the plastic that is used, consumed, that ends up in the rivers by the pathways that the small streams carry, the river water or even the rainwater carries all the plastic pollution. If it is not managed well, if it does not end in the landfills, it enters and ends into the seas by passing through the rivers. So that is a huge impact. Wherever the plastic lies, that is going to end up in the river. In Pakistan, we see a lot of measures that have been taken by the government, which were in their control, like Sindh, Punjab and KP governments. They have introduced some legislation at their ends. And then the recent one was 2023 resolution in Islamabad, which banned the use of single or the single-use plastic. So they have tried to implement it. We saw that in Islamabad, we saw some months where there were strict implementation and regulation follow-up. But at the end, it all streams down to public awareness and enforcement of those acts. Those are not being done. Then at some NGO level too, there have been non-governmental organizations that have been trying to work in this aspect, WWF, IUCN, and then there is South Asia Cooperative Environment Program. They have been helping the government in implementing the policies of stopping the production of plastic and for effective waste management system.
Your point well taken. Zainab, as Dr. Fasiha said, how much vital it is to have investments in the circular economy, especially in recycling infrastructure, the most modern techniques of waste collection, management, incentivizing the waste pickers particularly, and then eco-friendly packaging, the decentralized systems to convert the waste into a resource and a valuable business, as recycling rate in South Asia is considerably well, but it is not up to the mark. So how do you see how much important it is to invest in the circular economy?
So waste is a resource actually if we manage it properly.
It is.
And it has a great potential, especially when we are talking about plastics. It has a great potential to contribute positively towards the country's GDP as well. Now if I talk about Pakistan, there are many startups and SMEs who are working towards managing plastic waste, collection, sorting, and then also upcycling, which means they're adding value to the plastic waste that we are throwing away. And also the private sector, the plastic producer organizations are also trying really hard, especially as Dr. Fasiha mentioned that now regulations are coming up to convert plastic waste into resource. But the only challenge that we see here is a lack of a circular economy policy. But now the government of Pakistan is working towards developing a policy on circular economy. And circular economy policy, one thing must be clear, that it is not only focused around managing plastic waste. It is focused around different aspects, and the priority area of circular economy is in the design, that we design a product in a way that it does not become a waste that creates a problem in the later on stage of the life cycle of that product. So designing a product in a way that we also ensure that once it gets at the end of its life cycle, how we can reuse it and repurpose it so that the waste crisis gets reduced. Circular economy policies will entail sectors like construction, agriculture, and it should integrate textiles and other leading sectors where we are not talking about only plastic production in the country, but also how we are importing the plastics in the form of trade practices.
Definitely,
so this
not
is why
only
it's important.
local production, but also what we are importing from the different
And
worlds.
Faisal, why I am focusing on this, that because most of the time in South Asian countries, the data around plastic production, you will find it. The data around consumption, you will find it. But how much are we importing, that data is never mentioned anywhere in the
That is very important, and the data overall is important to carve any sort of a policy. Ma'am Afia, according to several studies, the plastic is also the main source and contributor to the air pollution, especially when we are talking about smoke, as plastic contributes substantially to the greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for approximately 4% of all global emissions annually. Its impact spans every stage of its life cycle, from raw material extraction to production, consumption and disposal, and it amplifies actually climate crisis. How do you respond to this?
So, well, smog is a seasonal as well as a very small area, but you're right about its contribution to the pollution, air pollution as well. But I would go back to what Zainab just articulated, the circularity of the production to the entire consumption and the waste disposal cycle. That needs to be emphasized. That is the only thing that will take care of this issue, other than the enforcement and implementation of the existing rules and laws and what have you. I mean, the provincial laws are there banning single-use plastic, but do we not see it? We still have people using it. The other problem is to lump every kind of plastic together. And here I'll go back to what I said, that it is because of the lack of correct communication. PET bottles at the time when they were being launched were 100% recyclable. They were pitched as the 100% recyclable product. But what happened? Our behavior change communication was not able to push that enough, and our habit of just throwing it as a single-use item created those mounds of waste, which we could have actually done without, because that could be recycled and repurposed and upcycled. All these things are not mere words. The whole world is now coming around to that concept. And we do have examples even within Pakistan of companies doing that, and also labeling it actually for the sake of transparency of how much of their product has been recycled from their own earlier plastic bottles. So that is something that we need to actually showcase and push for, because ultimately anything that goes into our water bodies is harming not just the water bodies, it's the life below water, above water, and it's coming through the food chain, because we also have microplastics. Those nanoparticles have already reached the food chain. So the marine life that we consume as food is already polluted.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. It is not only harming the riverine water or the oceans, but also the underground water as well, and the rainwater, because that is also precious and very important for agriculture and all that, and food security. So, Afia, how to tackle devastating plastic waste, as at least according to the data, 3.3 million tons or more than that, 3.9 million tons, some say that it's the plastic production in Pakistan. So we are using at least 55 billion plastic bags only annually, with 15% rise in that usage each year. So that makes us at least among the top 6 plastic producing countries, and the country has at least 20% direct plastic waste through the plastic bags, and 50% through single-use plastic like straws, cups, food containers, and all others. So how do you see that, how we have to respond it? Because most of the experts say that circular economy is the answer, or including that, the recycling, reuse, and that is the area where we have to focus.
So you see, again, going back to the fact that we have laws which have banned single-use plastic. Unfortunately, all the focus has been on the plastic bags, the shoppers as we call them. But all the other material you have mentioned, we see the absolutely oxymoronic marketing of having paper straws now, which are wrapped in plastic. So, I mean, you make that make sense to me. How is that any help? The other thing is that we only look at plastic as a problem. Now, it is our habit of chucking things out which is the problem. Plastic in itself is not a problem. It's when it was invented. I mean, this has been around just for one generation. Before that, we were living without plastic, and we used to still go grocery shopping. We used to still carry stuff home, and that was all doable. So it is a convenience. It was seen as a convenience, and it's only, when we adopt to something, then later on you start looking at its downside. Unfortunately, I mean, these projections were not there at that time. But even now, if the segregation is, if first the enforcement of the laws promulgated by the provinces is there, that anybody
Definitely,
who is
Afia,
throwing
we'll talk on those regulations as well. You are absolutely right, because plastic is actually not the problem. We are creating the problem, and we have seen there in Peshawar, in some of the parts of the country, that through this plastic, most of the valuable furnitures and lots of articles people are actually making, and they are earning a lot of profit out of that. So the recycling is also an area where we have to focus really. So Zainab, why, despite of plastic pollution adverse effects on human health, especially when chemicals release into the soil, air, as Afia is rightly pointing out, that into soil, water, air, and not only creates alarming chain reaction, but also that known as the biomagnification, you know better than me, due to the lethal microplastics, most of the times 5 millimeter in diameter, the particles entering in the food chain, leading to adverse human health effects, particularly the low birth weight and asthma and childhood leukemia, the lungs cancer. While the plastic waste can attract the pests and vectors as well that can spread these diseases into the humans and livestock and plants as well. So that actually harm the food security and resultantly the economy. So how do you see this chain of reactions through the plastic pollution, and why we are not curtailing it?
So when a primary plastic is produced, that is usually, that's the macroplastic. As you mentioned, microplastics, and then we have nanoplastics also,
yes,
smaller than microplastics. Those are the secondary plastics. They are produced when macroplastic gets degraded due to natural processes or due to pressure and even radiation from the sunlight. So when a plastic is thrown into a water body, it degrades due to different phenomena into micro and nanoplastics. Now, in context of the smaller the size, and there's an article that says that too much room at the bottom, which means smaller the size, it can create more toxicity, as it has more maximum chances that it infiltrates into the bloodstream and into the macro or micro level fauna and flora, and that we consume. So yes, it has a chain reaction. But coming towards the key point, as Afia also mentioned about communication, etc., when your consumer is unable to comprehend that level of challenge or toxicity plastic is creating, no bans or regulations will work. For example, if we start implementing or enforcing the regulations and bans around plastic bags, the single-use plastics, or maybe around any other plastic product, if we are not providing the consumers the alternatives to plastic, it will not help. Definitely. And also there's another point that we need to remember, as Afia mentioned, that it is after this generation is facing the plastic crisis. The earlier generation did not have this issue because plastic was not introduced. We need to get back to the basics. We need to to get back to those practices, the indigenous practices that we were practicing before plastics was introduced in our system. We need to carry our own bottles, we need to carry our own grocery bags instead of buying. But again, for the new generation, if eco-friendly alternatives are not provided and communicated to them, they will not understand why these bans are being implemented.
That's why Afia is stressing upon the behavioral change communication. That is very important.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Fasiha, what do you think about the reports that which suggest that Pakistan's 70% of the total plastic waste enters into the water bodies, resulting in the deaths of more than 100,000 of the marine mammals or even the riverine species, annually due to the entanglement, like worstly affected marine creatures. It's all about. So, while 95% of the fresh water is actually, especially the tap water in Pakistan, is unfit for the human consumption due to the contamination of the microplastics and all that. So, how do you see this whole scenario?
Whenever we think of water pollution, the concept comes that it might be because of only the mud, or there would be pollution somewhere near the sources of the source of this water. But actually, all the plastic that we use, the ultimate victim are the waterways, and ultimately all of that reaches into the sea. So it does not only cause the visual pollution problems, the natural ecosystem is destroyed. It also impacts the biodiversity over there. The turtles, the green turtles that we have in Pakistan, and some fish species as well, they think that they mistake the plastic particles as food, they ingest them, and either they die, or the plastic, especially the microplastics, they get incorporated into our food chain. So these are the adverse effects, and the people need to know that all the plastic pollution that they're creating, it ultimately even affects those things which are not in their view. So there is a loss of comprehension of the level of damage the pollution plastic does. So there is another statistics that 90% of the sea pollution, that is because of the land-based pollution. So the ecosystems are interconnected, and until we resolve the issues of the land, we cannot ensure the safe supply of clean drinking water or the clean environment for the species.
Well elaborated. Afia, how this mismanagement or the no recycling or the swelling landfills or the scattered plastic waste is actually affecting the land and the sea resources, as plastic pollutants impacts environment, particularly agriculture, alter the soil composition as well, the reducing soil fertility, affecting the plant growth, when in oceans destroy the marine life, damaging corals, reducing fish population, and resultantly affects the humans and economy. So overall, it's the problem which were created by the humans actually, how humans can tackle this for their existence particularly.
So I mean, the climate change entire problem has been created by the humans. I think the science about that is settled.
Very right.
So you see, again, it is about the circularity, which is important, and it's the supply chain. The most alarming thing of all the statistics that you and Zainab and Dr. Fasiha have quoted is that the production of plastic bags is going up. Now, if this is happening despite the laws that are banning the use of those single-use plastic without any kind of communication which will allow the citizens to look for alternate solutions, I don't think it's only up to the government, because the solutions, as I mentioned before, were there. They have to see is all around them, and a lot of changes have been done. I mean, many of the organizations which used to hand out things, or even the literature in plastic bags, are now giving fabric bags. The fabrics are also being used at the bigger markets which are facing the main roads. But you go into the back streets of those very cities or the very provinces where the laws have been promulgated, and the single-use plastic bags are still there. So again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but enforcement needs to be there, and at source, unless and until the supply is reduced or to the point where it ends, you will not be able to get rid of this problem. Yes, in
And
businesses and
Afia, if you
livelihoods
just
are.
if you just mention few words about the behavioral change communication, how we can make it effective and to reach everyone, so that there must have to be some change we can bring into the minds of the people actually.
You see, yeah, as Zainab said, people are not really cognizant of the harm that this ultimately gives. Or it's only the scientific community or the environmental community which is talking about micro and nanoplastic and marine pollution and triple planetary crisis and the food chain being affected. This is not a common dominant narrative. So you are taking this subject up, and other people in the media also need to speak about these things to make it reach to the common person so they realize that this is something very harmful for them. You know, there was a time when smoking was something very considered not very harmful. It was a social practice, and ultimately it was the enforcement of laws, the banning of the communication which glorified the convenience and the, you know, the glamour associated with the with smoking, and then limiting the spaces where it could be done, which has ultimately sort of reduced that problem. It hasn't gone away. It's an adult choice. Unfortunately, it's still, we still see minors indulging in it, but that's where enforcement comes in. So you have to have all things working together, the promulgation of laws, provision of alternate, the people's livelihoods are associated with it, so give them the transition time to move on to some alternate livelihood. You can't just stop at cold turkey.
Well described.
So,
Well described, Afia. Thank you. Well described. Dr. Fasiha, we know that, as Afia is stressing upon, that we know that the plastics are cheaper,
Yeah.
durable, easily accessible, even affordable, and it's in all regions across the world, especially in Pakistan, with a struggling economy. A blanket ban will ultimately put people out of jobs, deprive them from the daily livelihood, and reduce their customers actually to the footfall. So if no alternative is available, so what could be the viable solution?
So plastics popularity is because they're cheaper and they're lightweight to carry. They're very convenient. People do realize sometimes that they are harming the environment, but then they look at the convenience. It's always available and they don't have to put in much effort. So unless, as Dr. Afia was saying, that unless the people have access to this, the first choice is that we can limit the production. The production should go down to a point where it is not available to the people. And then people are going to get back to the basics, as it was stated.
And why not
earlier
some
too.
sort of alternative biodegradable
Yes,
production
and
as well
yeah.
to start with? If you reduce some ongoing production,
Yes.
then you have to start some sort of a biodegradable production as well.
Exactly.
And why not to propagate or communicate to the people that in older times, when the people bring their bags from their home, the clothing bags, the
You can use the
parachute
paper
bags and all others,
exactly.
and even to have paper bags or something like that. Again, it would be the forestry issue.
Yes.
But why not we get some sort of a stencil or some article from our home to have liquids in that and all that. Earlier we were practicing actually.
We were practicing that, and then going back to the basics when you have no other choice, that is quite viable. But then you also move on to the point that creating renewable and biodegradable resources, that is also a part of economy which is going to create jobs.
Definitely.
So circular economy policy is necessary. It is going to aim at creating more jobs. There are going to be many other sectors that are going to open up with the green sector
circular
coming up.
economy policy is very important.
Yes.
Zainab, your area. So do you not think that the living in this initiative actually offers hope in establishing the zero plastic waste cities within the Indus Basin by actually restoring the ecological health of the Indus Basin, effective plastic waste management, and advancing the climate action, particularly through regulatory regimes, the tech innovation, economic incentives, and institutional capacity building, and resultantly a tangible pathway towards a sustainable urban development? So why not to have the zero plastic waste cities?
So, Faisal, the crisis in Pakistan, the plastic crisis is not something that's unsurmountable. I
Yeah,
mean,
yes.
we can tackle it. This is a situation, and if we act today, Living Indus Initiative, which is an initiative that is formulated through collaboration with the UN system and the government of Pakistan Ministry of Climate Change. It also won the Restoration Award at the UNEP. So, I think it one of the interventions that it proposes is zero plastic waste cities, and within that intervention, the UN system and government aims to work with development partners to gather resources and work around ideas and initiatives that will help to curtail plastics that are being leaked into the river Indus system, especially through the cities that are around the river Indus, and that is causing the contamination. So yes, it is one of very good initiatives, and the government and through with UN system is working around it. One of the key initiatives, I think, while working with the Living Indus initiative, we have been able to map the startups and SMEs who are providing the solutions. And through your platform, I would like to mention here that one of the startup was proposing an eco-friendly biodegradable bag, plastic bag,
Yes.
and the cost was around 4 to 5 PKR. So when you go to a grocery store now and you they ask you if you want a grocery tote bag for your grocery items, and when you purchase it, it costs around 15 to 20 PKR. So that's the difference when you get connected with the local startups and SMEs, and this is what we are doing with Living Indus Initiative, to get them connected with the industry and also with the public sector, so that we have the local solutions. And when local solutions are there, the price it will be reduced and consumers will be made aware. Communication is the key, awareness is the key, and then the regulations enforcement is the key to curtailing the problem of plastic pollution.
Absolutely right, absolutely right. Dr. Fasiha, why we are unable to implement what Afia, Zainab, all of us are worrying about, that why we are unable to implement the enacted laws, the rules on ground, why biodegradable bags were not persistent in our daily life. What are the hurdles in between? Despite that we had the single-use plastic prohibition regulation 2023, you have already mentioned. Then the Punjab plastic strategy always there. The Sindh government also banned the use of single-use plastic and overall the plastic bags as well. And other provinces are also very eager to have all these. Yeah. But why not implementation? Why not we are having some sort of a cutting-edge decision making to have viable solutions as well as the tangible results?
In Pakistan, the basic problem has always been the enforcement of the policies. There are many good policies and laws, but the implementation has been a big factor, which we fail we fail in achieving that. Then I also think that we need to get on a point where the saving the environment and protection of the environment, and even the protection of the life and a healthy environment, healthy clean air, which is a basic right under the United Nations SDGs as well. We need to make them a priority rather than pushing all these basic rights under the carpet. When they collide with the economic gains. Third thing is that we need to sit down and bring all the stakeholders together. One agency, if a government is working for some betterment, the other key stakeholder, that can be the private sector or that can be the local community, they come as a hurdle and they protest against that law. So all the stakeholders need to come together. They need to realize that there are bigger goals to achieve and they have to work together to get to the basic level. Then we also need to identify and create a database where the government heads the department, heads this initiative. Like we can inculcate, reduce, reuse and recycle, the 3 R's into our daily life practices. But these can be done at individual level, but when the recycle part comes, there should be some national body that is heading that, because recycling can be done or segregation of the waste can be done at a national level, not only at an individual level. So bringing all the stakeholders together at a table and identifying what we want to achieve, that is one of the basic element. And then you have to always include the local communities with whom you are working. They need to realize that this is just not an inconvenience that the government is imposing upon them.
You are absolutely right. It is not only the government's job. We have to include the communities, the industrial sector, even the students, the youth, all of them who are the practitioners like you all, and also waste pickers also. We have to include them as well, because they are doing an excellent job,
they
and
are
we
doing
have
an
we don't
excellent
have much of the infrastructure to have waste management and waste picking actually.
Yes.
So they are doing an excellent job. So we have to incentivize that as well. So thank you very much for your presence, Dr. Fasiha. Thank you very much, Zainab, for your presence here. And thank you very much, Ma'am Afia, for your presence there in Karachi. I know you are very busy, but you have spared time. Thank you very much for your candid views as well. So nice of you for your presence online. So viewers, no doubt that this plastic pollution is actually impacting our health, environment, agriculture, livestock, food security, resultantly our economy. There are lots of reasons for that. And one prime reason is the businesses, which are flourishing at the cost of humans, the nature, wildlife, and the marine life as well. So unfortunately, we are not focusing much on recycling, reuse, and these are actually, plastic is no doubt a problem as well, but this is more than a resource than a problem. Living Indus initiative can help in that. Government is very much focused on circular economy and particularly the circular economic policy. So that would be really a catalyst of change in the overall behavior. But we have to focus on reducing production as well, and some kind of a production which is not going to be ended up as a waste, but to just recycle and reuse. So we require data of the local production and also the imports regarding the plastic products, so that we know that how much plastic is actually consumed, disseminated in Pakistan, and how much is going to leak into the environment, so that we can make such policies and implement them forcefully. That is very important. Behavioral change communication is must have to be very effective, and unfortunately that is still missing. Media has to play a critical role in that, and they have to play, as Afia was stressing about, that private media has to take its part as well. So when we are talking about the overall global plastic treaty, the technical debate is actually missing. 9 to 10% increase every year into the plastic production. We have to curtail it. We have to increase the size of recycling. That is only 10% globally. We have to increase. Every day the governments allow polluters to continue flooding the world with plastic, and we are paying the price of it. We desperately need a legally binding global plastic treaty. That is inevitable, because allowing plastic use means allowing death to take over, allowing plastic to consume us. We have only one planet to live. All the nature, the wildlife, the marine life, they have also only one planet to live. So we can postpone the negotiations, shelve the treaty, but not the crisis which posed by the plastic pollution. This is all from today's Foresight. It's time to sign off. Allah Hafiz.